and welcome to the second video in my series covering chess openings. So in the last video we looked at the Italian game, which started with the moves by pushing his pawn to e4. Black responds back with e5, so we get this symmetrical structure. Then white puts his knight out to attack this pawn, and black takes his knight out to defend. And then here, the beginning of the Italian game starts with the bishop moving here. And here what the bishop does is it's very effective on this diagonal. So we learned in the last video a defense for white, and now we're going to learn a defense for black. So if we flip the board here, so here white will generally start by pushing his pawn 2 squares forward. And black will also usually respond with the same. And then here, as we know, white would like to attack our pawn by pushing his knight out to f3, and here we got an option. So we could play this move and let white play the Italian game against us, or we could play the defense called the Petrov's defense. And here what this does is it's basically saying you can have this pawn, and I'll have your pawn. So it's basically a trade. So here, white would generally accept as, well, he's always white and he wants to attack, so therefore he would take the pawn. And then as black, before taking this pawn, would push his knight back. And the reason is, if we didn't push his knight back, and we took this pawn immediately, that he could simply play his queen out here, and now we witness a problem. So we see that our knight is attacked, and furthermore our king. And here we have to move our knight back, which allows white to play a very nice tactic to win the game. So here, for example, let's just say we bring our knight back. Now, white can play the stunning move, playing his knight to c6. And it looks like this is just a free knight. We could even take it with a pawn or knight. But in fact, it's not. Because right now, our king is in check by the queen. So basically, this knight is attacking our queen, while this queen is also attacking our king. And even if we block with our queen, white can just take this queen, and after we do this, white's just winning because he has a queen for a knight, which is obviously a very good trade. So going back, that's why you do not want to just take this pawn greedily. And that's why you want to play this move, pushing his knight back. So here, after white responds to this, which is naturally by putting his knight back, now it is safe to take. And now if white tries to do the same thing by putting his queen out, we could just block with our queen, and after he pushes it back, well, we could just see a little trade of queens here, and the position is equal. In fact, black is a little bit better here because his bishop is here and white's bishop is not here. So next move, black is ready to castle. So this is not a good option for white, so white should push this knight back if he wants to get even a slight advantage. So here we also move our knight back, and as you could see, there's some symmetry here. So black has a pawn on d6, 1 square forward, and white also has a pawn on d3, 1 square forward, and both the players have knights symmetrically placed. So here as white should probably push his pawn. The reason for this is because now he's further restricting our space. So for example, so here if black just takes out his knight naturally, then he will have to face bishop here on g3. And now, well, white's ready to castle. White can even check us if he really wants. White can even push this pawn at some point when we castle, because then after, for example, the knight were to take, then the bishop could take here, and say that we castle, we would take this and white would take that. So here there's a lot of possible things, and this position isn't really good for black. So going back, black's best option is to again follow the symmetry and push his pawn. Now we could see that black is also taking space just like white is. So here white would generally want to bring out his bishop, and the reason for this is because of course he wants to castle. Black would do the same, and there's more symmetry. So now here's the main point of the game. So now white could just castle casually, and after this black would castle, and okay, and now he would probably push his pawn forward to attack. And here after black plays this move, c6, defending his pawn, there's not really much for white to do here. And if white were to put pressure on our pawn by playing his knight out like this, we could always just take this pawn and release the pressure. And now we could even see that this pawn right here is pretty lonely, and it's in the middle of all the pieces which could be attacked in the near future. So that's one option of the game, of the type of game that white can play. But white can also play the style of the game, which is being attacking right away. So if he decides to attack right away, then in fact black will have an advantage. After black takes, white would want to take, and now black just castles. After white castles, black can push his pawn, and as we could see again, this pawn is really in the middle of the battlefield and there's no other pawns to connect to it, which make this pawn pretty lonely. And eventually black would want to put his knight out here to put pressure on this pawn, and maybe he would even play his rook out here to maybe put it out here on e4 to put pressure on this pawn that way, and he could always just play his bishop back to allow the queen to attack this pawn. So pretty much we could see that this pawn will be facing a lot of pressure in the future. So this is why white should not play this game. Okay, so going back, we learn in this variation that black would pretty much be equal, if not better. So here white has another option to play, which is pushing his pawn 2 squares. Now this is very interesting. As we could see, instead of taking our pawn right away with the knight, white is offering another pawn. However, if we take this pawn, then white doesn't have to capture right away. Instead, he could be really annoying and push our knight back. Now, well, after our knight goes to the middle, which is the best move, and white takes this pawn, we could then play our pawn out here and we get a position like this. And the only problem with this position is that, well, after white brings his knight out, we could see that this knight is kind of misplaced. And also, white is really ahead in development. So for example, he's less squares away from castling, as he only has to take out this bishop to a square that's good, like for example d3. Whereas black has to play really passively in this position, and he has to play his bishop here, which will then allow this queen to take this pawn. So here, as we could see, black doesn't have a very pleasant position, and white should be a little bit better. So going back, the best move for black is to capture this pawn instead with his knight. And after white were to take with his knight, we could then push our pawn forward to annoy this knight, as if we were to push here, well, we'd get this structure, which again, it's okay, but white's always a little bit better, because he's the one who gets to decide the attack. For example, if he just brings out his queen here, he's already attacking this square. So that's why instead we kick this knight first, the knight has to go back, and now we place our pawn here. And now it's a different story if white decides to go back, because now we could instead annoy white this way. And after the queen comes out to defend, we get to trade. And well, we do get this position, and it's pretty good for black, as black has a very clear plan to bring out his bishop here, bring out his bishop here, castle this way, bring the rooks here, and it's just going to be destruction. Also, another thing is that this white pawn is going to be really weak unless white plays a pawn move that's going to be passive. So here we could see that black just has a good advantage. Okay, so going back to this position, white's best bet is to play his bishop out here and have some ideas of taking our knight or just simply putting pressure on this pawn. As if this knight were to move in the future, then white could be attacking this pawn. So here, black would have to play his bishop out to try and put pressure on white's king. And then after white castles, first of all, black would also castle, and we could see all this pressure on white's king is not good. We could already see a lot of ideas that are dangerous for white. For example, our bishop is aiming at this pawn right here, close to the king. Our queen can come out at any time to attack this pawn e2. And this knight is always looking at this f2 pawn. So here, white has to act quickly, because otherwise, if he doesn't, we're just simply going to push our pawn up here to make space. And we're going to lift our rook here and attack this king. So here, white has to act quickly and put pressure on our position. So after we defend this, or if you're really aggressive, you may as well play this idea still. It still works, but it's not as good as after white plays this. As we could see now, well, white's putting pressure on black's king. So if you're really aggressive and willing to play position that's a bit risky, but it's very attacking, then you could go for this play style, where black would lift his rook up here, then put it here on this g6 square, and then he could be attacking this pawn right here close to the king. And this could go either way. But if you really want to play the classical defense, then you could simply push your... And now, after white brings out his rook, you can also bring out your rook. Now, in this position, white would generally want to bring out his queen to put pressure on our pawn. And now there's a trick behind this move though. So after this, we actually really don't even care about this pawn. We could actually just play our knight out to a6. And now this looks really silly, but there's a really nice trick behind it. So after white takes, we take. And now if white's greedy and it takes this pawn, we could then play a very nice tactic to win the game. So you could pause the video and try and find the tactic. So I'll give you a couple of seconds. Okay, so if we find the tactic, then that's very nice. And the tactic is, you simply take this pawn right here, close to the king. And now, we open a discovered attack on the queen, meaning that now, while the king is in check, we're also attacking the queen. And the queen cannot prevent check. So this is why, well now, white will have to take this bishop, and we could take his queen. And even after, well, white plays his knight out, so even after this, we could simply move our queen back or just take this pawn. Now it's just a crushing position. As we could see, white has a bishop and a knight for a whole queen, which is, it's almost as much as a queen value, but it's not quite enough, especially in a position like this. So black would be winning. Okay, so in this video, we learned the Petrov defense that starts with the move e4, e5, knight f3, and knight f6. And then we learned that this defense is very solid and can easily get you in equal position against the white team. So in my next video, we're probably going to cover another opening. So thanks for watching and see you in my next video.